So the divine director is a lovely master. And we think of him as being this awesome cosmic being who directs so much upon earth. And he's a member of the karmic board, is the Manu of the seventh age of Aquarius, which is dawning. And he's a guru of Saint Germain and of El Morya and even Jesus and probably many other masters. Yet we can choose to also recognize and see him and understand him as a very lovely master. In other words, he has great, great love for humanity, and he is also very charming and very attentive to our personal needs and requirements. And of course, the image that we have of him through the I Am activity is almost a feminine image. I mean, it's one where he has long blonde hair, almost white. And now in our movement, we've taken from that image keys to that identity and expanded a little bit in the more recent image that Lisa Delaney has done, which is, I believe, the best image of him that's available on the earth. So, in communion with him briefly before this meeting, because I was in a long, almost 3-hour meeting with the council, I just feel his love for Chicago, for all of us, for our Heart Center community, for every initiate who is desiring to help bring in the golden crystal age of Aquarius through higher consciousness, through our own divine efforts, through our service, through our willingness to be God taught, through our studies, through our love. We too can be lovely. And to be lovely, we have to be loving. And we have to be beloved of people because we charm them with our kindness, our authenticity, our prayerful attitude toward them, our ability to listen deeply, be concerned about them, and to honor who they are by simply being there for them. And this is something that I think all of us try to do. We are people who honestly and authentically care about life on earth and every individual that we come in contact with, that we hope to leave something of goodness with them, something of grace with them, in the way that we interact and communicate and hopefully share with each other. So, on behalf of the Heart Chakra and the Heart Chakra community of America, we call to the Great Divine Director or the Divine Director, either name is fine, to assist us on our spiritual path so that we can, using divine science, which is the subject of your discussions and your focus, especially today, move forward to bring that divine science into place within the world so that it really displaces the current science which is godless, which doesn't take into account the beauty, the harmony of God and the Creator. Divine science is not a misnomer because God created everything, and so everything that is amazing scientifically was conceived in the mind of God in the beginning. And the deeper we look into science, the deeper we go into how beautiful our creation is and how amazing and intricate everything is within the created world, we discover more of God. We find who we are within the creation, and we are so almost spiritually infatuated by what God has amazingly authored and put within the cosmos, the natural world, and within us. The Divine Director teaches about divine science on the inner planes. And one of these divine sciences is alchemy. And he has shared with Saint Germain, El Morya, Jesus, and other masters this higher divine science so that they could themselves, as masters, bring God's grace to the planet and help in a very spiritual, scientific way humanity, help humanity. Now, how do we help humanity in a spiritual, scientific way? We have to bring the balance of spirituality and science into play in what we present. It has to be real. It can't be feigned, because one of the aspects of the scientific method promulgated by Francis Bacon and others in recent centuries is to do experimentation, sometimes with blind studies, where we actually have an hypothesis which we try to prove through data that we collect, and we come to conclusions, and hopefully we come to a conclusion that brings benefit through that experiment. So we start with a hypothesis, we try to prove it scientifically through data and what we call facts, which are an organization of information that we list that hopefully brings light onto a subject or a topic, clarifies it, illumines it, and then brings it into place so that we can come to this conclusion that will, again, also bring us knowledge and wisdom. Now, spiritually, how do we do this in a scientific way? When we meditate, when we pray, hopefully we become more sensitive and we feel the effects of the light pouring through our chakras over time. First, as we purify ourselves and our chakras actually are sensitive. In other words, we can feel the light flowing through us, and then we can study the aspects of how spirituality through the release of light impacts ourselves, our world, our neighborhoods, our communities, other life streams. The more sensitive we become, the more crystal clear our consciousness, so that we can ascertain things from a more luminous perspective that's more universal, objective, as well as subjective. So universal awareness brings us into a higher plane of view or purview where we can see much more clearly what is transpiring. And we can't do this from an ego perspective, the Divine Director says. We can only really have the highest purview from a divine perspective from our God presence, because that gives us the authentic view and approach to dealing with anything. If we come from an ego perspective and bent, then we will always lose, because we will not be able to accept the higher radiant fields of light from the heaven world, because the ego separates us from God, clouds our vision, and does a disservice to us in terms of what we can be and who we are, because it is constantly attempting to insert itself into our lives as the real us, when it really is not the real us. So the divine us experiences life from a divine perspective, from a light perspective, from an approach that brings God consciousness and solar awareness into play rather than nonsensical, whimsical, dweller on the threshold knowledge, which really is not true knowledge. So when we prove the law of being by being who we are, being God in manifestation, being an extension of God, then we dynamically and scientifically apply the resources from our true self in our lives to be of benefit to others, to help others. Every experiment that we do spiritually should in some way benefit life. Otherwise, it's just nonsensical. It has no real higher purpose. So what do we experiment with? Well, when we pray, we surrender to God's will. We accept God's will. We accept already as complete and conclusive what we are visualizing and hoping for, so that that will bless and benefit others. We place our trust in God. We place our faith in God. We place our hope in God. And of course, we love God. And through faith, hope, and love, we have the anchoring in the 3D in our dimensional plane of being, God's essence, God's faith, God's hope, God's love for humanity, which is on a higher par than maybe what we personally have accepted to date. Divine science brings us to a restoration of a sense of oneness with all life, because when God created the cosmos, it was really one giant being. Even though it may have had many, many cells or little points of light within the creation, from God's perspective, the creation is one being. And the more we understand the sense of oneness, that we are connected with every other form of life, and we're just individual cells in God's being, which is the creation, the more we can, through that sense of oneness, understand the nature of all life and any life form. We can commune with a bumblebee, or a flower, or a river, or a cloud, a mountain, even inanimate objects, or we think they're inanimate. And through that communion, we can come to a deeper understanding of life as God has embedded God's essence within that life form. If we approach things from an anthropomorphic vantage point, we will be limited, because we didn't create God, God created us. Yet we've created an image of God that's anthropomorphic, that's in our image, rather than realizing that God created us in His, her image. So what is God's, His, her image? Light, solar beingness, consciousness, energy, loveliness, love itself. Without love, there would be no creation. Without love, God could not sustain the creation, and we would be simply unsustainable. Love is what holds us together, even as love is what holds the universe, the cosmos, together. Because God created out of love, from love, through love, and because God created out of, from, and through love, that love is at the core of everything that is created. Now, we may not always think of ourselves as alchemists or spiritual scientists, yet every day is an opportunity to walk upon the proving ground of our earth, to say to God and the creation, here I am, use me to benefit life, to help others, to bring blessings to sentient beings upon the earth. Oh God, use me as a resource today to fulfill your will upon this planet. When we do that, we set in motion a beautiful dynamic where God does send intercessors and mediators to utilize us as a resource because we've called it forth, and God and the higher powers and beings must obey it when we call on the name I am that I am for assistance, for help, or for the release of light. So what are some of the sciences beyond alchemy? Well, many of them relate to alchemy. Conscious cooperation with elementals and nature spirits is a science. And we're learning a lot about permaculture recently. Visualization of perfection as we do anything in our lives. This is a science. It's a divine science that the great silent watchers utilize and teach us about. Conscious, loving, authentic communication is actually a divine science and an art where we use words that edify, that uplift, that support, that bless, rather than words that are a curse, a downer, a bummer, or that bring people into lower fields of energy. So when we consciously communicate, it is the science of the spoken word. It's actually called that, the science of the spoken word. And we use that science to primarily pray with God and God's creative beings, angels, masters, divine beings. And in that prayer, there's an acceptance of a higher reality manifest on earth. And Jesus gave a beautiful prayer, thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven, the Lord's Prayer. And so Jesus was an alchemist. He knew the science of as above, so below, as in heaven, so on earth. As it already exists in the etheric, so it may be in our plane when we allow it to manifest through love, givingness, surrender, patience, and all of the virtues. What are some of the other sciences? Well, we've learned about solar gazing, an ancient art where we take in the light from the sun into our eyes, and it stimulates the cortex, it stimulates the optic nerve, it stimulates the pineal gland, and gives us higher consciousness. The pineal gland, for those who solar gaze often and with mastery, grows, as we found out from the gentleman from India who is lovingly referred to as HRM, Hiram being his first name. M, something like Manik or Mantek. So, what are some of the other divine sciences? Using imagination and ideation to co-create with God through our higher mind. We imagine something as we hold an image and clothe that image with love, with light, with divine substance. And then we accept it into manifestation through our emotional bodies, supporting its entree into the physical plane through the emotional and from the mental and the etheric planes. So imagination, visualization, ideation, conception, all of these are key words in co-creation, which is a science. It's a science of creating with God or with others who represent God also. We can co-create with an ascended being. We can co-create with other heart friends and a master heart-mind alliance. We can co-create consciously with our own higher self, which is really inside of us, yet for the purpose of understanding what co-creation is, it's co meaning with, and there have to be two. Although when we are in league with or one with our I am presence, we collapse that duality into the unity field, and then it's really us creating as a oneness, as a whole, like the uniplurality of the Elohim, two in one. God created in his, her image and likeness, male and female created he, them, or us, so we are part of a whole. Divine science is something that we can contemplate whenever we desire something to happen, because that desire sets in motion through the higher laws of alchemy energy, consciousness. And where we put our attention upon, there our energy flows, and that eventually we become. Where we place our attention, our focus, our energy goes. And because our energy goes there, what energy? Well, the energy of our love, adoration, our desire. And what we keep desiring eventually is magnetized to us. If, of course, we desire it in the proper way. If we have wrong desire, impure desire, we may not get what we want or what we desire, because it may not be best for us. And we have those looking out for us who will say, well, let's not really give this person this because he, she may be hurt by it, or they won't have an improved life, or maybe they'll have riches in the short term, but then what? They could abuse those riches or money and waste it on lascivious living, and then what? They're worse off for it. Divine science is a beautiful thing when we understand that our whole life is an alchemical opportunity for growth, learning, spiritual evolution, givingness, co-creation.